Start Heichi Kedusha. So we'll, you lead us, and then we'll go silent. You lead through the Kedusha, and then we'll go silent. Oreini megabel alai et mitzvot avore be'avdalere agagamocha l'reacha kamocha Oreini megabel alai et mitzvot avore be'avdalere agagamocha l'reacha ay 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 Page 65, please rise. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam asher natan l'sech b'vin alef chim ben yom u'ben laila. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam shasani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam shasani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam bokei achivri. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam al bisharu mihim. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam atir asuri. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam zokev gevuvim. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam Baruch atah Adonai Baruch atah Adonai Cholam shasali kol tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam michim mitzadek aver. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam Ozeh Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam oteh Yisrael b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam anoten l'yaif koach. Baruch atah Adonai Cholam Amen v'yoshen amen ayodnu mamia papai Utznenu hayom chol yom lechenu chas rachamim v'necha v'nei choroenu v'timlenu chasadim tovim Baruch atah Adonai gomel chasadim tovim le'amo Yisrael Yiratzom milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu shetatzilenu hayom le'olam Adonai Aval anachnu amcha b'nei britcha Ashreinu ma tov chalkeinu ma na'im varleinu ma yafa yushatenu Ashreinu shanachnu mashkim marivim erev avokev ve'omrim pamayim b'chol yom Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad V'Shem Elohim Abed Atahu Hashem Kadesh et Shimcha Makdeshei Shemecha V'Kadesh Shimcha Ba'olamecha B'Yishuatecha Tarim B'Tagbiach Karnenu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh Shimcha Barabim. We study selected texts on the following pages, page 68 and page 69. Amar Rabbi Elazar Kol Aseh Tzedakah Mishpat Ki'ilu Milei Kol Am Kulo Chesed Shenema Tzedakah Mishpat Chesed Ha'im Al Haaretz Mai Dichtiv Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'lo avotenu shetiten chelkenu b'toratecha v'niyeh mitalmidav shel Aaron HaKohen ohev shalom v'rodef shalom ohev et habriyot u'korban laTorah. Page 81, Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit LeDavid Aramim Chanan הפכת מספדי למחולי, פיתחת צחקי ותעזרני שמחה, למען יזמרך חבל ולא ידום, אדוני אלוהי לעולם עודך. Please rise, page 83. Baruch Shemar vaya olam, Baruch hu, Baruch Oseh Bereshit, Baruch Omer ve'oseh, Baruch Ozeh, Baruch Podem, Baruch Shemar. Yachid Chei Olamim, Melech Meshubach Umpardi et Shemo HaGadol, Baruch Atah Adonai, Melech Me'olam V'tishbachot. Page 87, Lamatzeach Mizmor LeDavid, Hashamayim Mesaberim Kevod El, U'maseh Yadav Magia Rakia Yom 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 Yom. השמיים הוצאות פיקודי אדוני שם משמחי למצוות ברא מירת עיניים ירצוני אמרתי וגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי בגואלי. Page 89. תפילה למשה איש האלוהים אדוני ואדוני בבוקר יציץ בחלב לב ימלא ביבש כי חלינו באחדו. צבנו מלגבו V'nom Adonai Eloheinu aleinu ma'aseh yadeinu konen aleinu ma'aseh yadeinu koneneu. Page 92, please rise. Odul Adonai Gito Gilei Olam Chazdo Odul Elohim Gilei Olam Chazdo Odul Adonai Adonim Gilei Olam Chazdo Ay 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 abaray ay 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 Leoseni flaud gedol levado gilei olam chazdo Leoseh shamayim v'devuna gilei olam chazdo Leroga haaretz al hamayim gilei olam chazdo Ay 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 Leoseh orim gedolim gilei olam chazdo Et ha-shemesh lememshelet bayom gilei olam chazdo Et ha-yereach v'kokabim lememshelo balayla gilei olam chazdo Ay 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 Namakke Mizrahim bivgorehem gilei olam chazdo Leyotzei Yisrael mitocham gilei olam chazdo V'yel chazakav b'zoin etuyo gilei olam chazdo Ay 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 V'fregeinu mitzareinu gilei olam chazdo Noten lechem lechol basar hilei olam chazdo ahodu lahel hashamayim gilei olam chazdo ay 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 ambaradai ay 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 ay. Page 94, you may be seated. Mizmor Shir Le'yom HaShabbat. Tov le'odol Adonai Magalu Masechaya Me'od Ameku Makshavotecha Magalu Masechaya Me'od Ameku Makshavotecha Ishbar lo yeda uchsi lo yavin ezot Bifroach Ki hine oyevecha rai Ki hine oyevecha yovedu yitpardu Sadikat amar yifrach Keherez balbanon Izgeshetulim Bebeit Adonai Vechazrot Eloheinu Yavrichu Od Yenuvon B'Seiva Deshenim Verononim Lehagid Ki Yashar Adonai Zori Velo Avlat Ashrei, page 96. Ashrei Odrei Beitecho Od Yalelu Chazela Ashrei Aham Shekachalo Ashrei Aham Shadonai Eloah Deila LeDavid Haro Mimcha Elohai HaMelech Ve'abarecha Shimcha Le'olam Va'ed B'chol Yom Ha'abarechecha Ve'halal Shimcha Le'olam Va'ed Gadol Adonai Umulal Me'od Ve'ligdulato Enchei Kedor Ledor Yishabach Ma'asecha Gvuratecha Yagidu Adar Kebododecha Shomer Adonai et kol oavav ve'et kol harshayim yashmir Tehilat Adonai yedaber bi Vivarecha basar Shem kodsho le'olam va'ed Va'anachnu nivorech Yah Me'ata v'yad olam Hallelujah. Page 99. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Adonai min hashamayim. Hallelujah, b'meromim. Hallelujah, kol ha'olam. Hallelujah, shmei hashamayim v'amayim. Hallelujah, shmei hashamayim. 1 Samuel 17, 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 1 Samuel 17 וירם קרן לעמוד, הילה לכל חסידיו, לעיני ישראל עם קרובו, הללויה, הללויה. השיר לנו שיר חדש. לאסור מלכיכם בזיקים ונכבדיהם בחבלי ברזל, לעשות במשפט כתוב, הדרו לכל חסידיו. Hallelujah, 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 el begocho, hallelujah, belkiauzo, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 betega shofar, hallelujah, benebel bechinor, hallelujah. Tov machol, hallelujah, b'minim be'ugav, hallelujah, 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 v'tziltzalei shama, hallelujah, v'tziltzalei shema. Shama de hallelujah, hallelujah, golane shama de hallelujah, hallelujah, baruch Adonai Elohim baruch Anatziyam v'tziyam v'rochem yishlam hallelujah, baruch Adonai Elohim Yisrael oseh niflo levado, baruch Shem kivodo me'olam. Amen, amen. Please rise, page 101. By Baruch David, Adonai, Negol David. By Baruch Adonai. Atahu Adonai Elohim asher bacharta be'Avraham be'otzei tomi orkastim be'samta shema Avraham watzata lebo ne'eman lefanecha becharot imo abrit latelu v'haya bakat alifneihem v'yavru b'toch hayam v'yavasha v'rov v'hem yishlachta v'imtzolot k'mo even b'mayim azim v'yosha Adonai Vayom Ed Yisrael miyad Mitzrayim Vayar Yisrael et Mitzrayim et Asvat Hayam Vayar Yisrael et Hayar Agdala Asher Adonai Mitzrayim Vayiram et Adonai Vayaminu Adonai of Moshe Avdo Az Yashir Moshe Ubnei Yisrael Et Ashir Azor Ladonai Vayamiru Leimor Ashir al Adonai Gigaoga Zuz v'rochibo Rama Vayam Ozi b'zimradia Vayehili Lishua Zeli b'anevehu Eloi avi v'aram emenu Adonai Yishmel Kamanai Simon Malki Baruch Dis lachen ga yochelim ukakas urokabecha Noratilo tosefele Adonai imloch leolam ba'ed, Adonai imloch leolam ba'ed, Gil Adonai imlocha Moshe v'goyim v'alim Moshim v'ad Zion lishvod et ha'reisav, Vayital Adonai Melucha V'Adonai Melech al kol haaretz Vayom V'ayin echad Ushmo echad. You may be seated, page 104. Nishmat kol chai Tivarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. Nishmat kol chai Tivarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. Ein lanu melech el atam. Could song fill our mouths as water fills the sea, and could joy flood our tongue like countless waves? Could our lips utter praises limitless as the sky, and could our eyes map the splendor of the sun? Could we soar with arms like eagle's wings, and run with gentle grace as the swiftest deer? Never could we fully state our gratitude for 1/10,000 of the lasting love that is your precious blessing, your thumb. From Egypt you redeemed us. You sustained us, you rescued us. To this day your passion, your passion. ונשבחך ונפארך ונברך את שם קודשך כאמור לדוד. ברכי נפשי את אדוני וכל קרבי את שם קודשו. היה בתעצומות עוזך גדול מכבוד שמך, גיבור לנצח והנורא בנורותיך. המלך היושב על כיסא רם ונישא. שוכן עד is on page 105.
It's a new tune. שוכן עד מרום וקדוש שמו וכתוב רננו צדיקים באדוני לישרים נבעתי לה בפי שרים תתהלל ובדברי צדיקים תתברך ובלשון חסידים תתרומם ובקרב קדושים תתקדש ובקרב קדושים תתקדש. וכן קובע כל היצורים לפניך אדוני אלוהינו לאהבתנו להודות להלל לשבח לפאר לרומם להדר לברך ולעלה לקלס הכל דברי שירו ותשבחות דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך. Please rise. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. רחוב ההודעה מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני אל מלך גדול ותשבחות אל ההודעות אדון הנפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך אלוהי העולמים. Yikadal ve'yikadash shemei Rabbah. Yamad yivrach yirteh v'yamlich malchuteh b'chayechon v'yamaychon u'chayet kol beit Yisrael. V'agala v'zman kari v'yimruhu. Amen. Yehesh shmei Rabbah mevorach elom me'yamaya. Yibarak v'yishtabak v'yipar v'yiroman v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha v'richu. Leila min kol v'chata v'shirata. Tush v'chata v'nechemata. Damiran b'yalma v'yimruhu. Amen. Top of 107. Baruch hu et Adonai mevorach. Baruch Adonai mevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai kol yidol chavay godosh. Aleinu limad HaMashiach ve'into melech HaMoshiach l'tchiyat hamitim. El Adon al kol hama'asim baruch hu mevorach v'vikol haneshama gadlo v'tuvo ma'alei olam da'atu tfuna sovevim oto hamikael chayot hakodesh v'nedar b'chavod al ha'merchava zechut u'mishor lifnei kiso chesed v'rachamim lifnei kevodo Tovim me'orot shebara Eloheinu yitzaram b'da'a b'vina uvaskel koach u'gevur anatan bahem liot moshlim b'kerev tevel meleim ziv amfikim noga nahazivam b'chol ha'olam semechim b'tzeitam V'sasim bevoam, osim b'yema retzon kohonam. Pe'er v'chavod nodnim lishmo, tzala v'rina lezecher malchuto. Kara Hashem eshva yizrachor, ravehikin surat halvanan. Shevach nodnim lo kol tzeva marom. Tiferet ugedula serafim v'ofanim v'chayot hakodesh. Yai dai dai dai, yai dai 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 dai. Sephardic. Yai dai 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 dai, yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai, yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Share Shabbat mikol ha'masim v'yom ha'shvi'i Mizmor shir liyom ha'shabbat Mizmor shir liyom ha'shabbat Mizmor shir liyom ha'shabbat Mizmor shir liyom ha'shabbat Tovodot Shim charon וכולם מקבלים עליהם ומלכות שמיים זה מזה ונותנים רשות זה לזה להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח בשפה ורוח ובנימה קדושה כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים ביראה קדוש 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 ונשבח כל הארץ כבודו ואופנים וחיות הקודש ברעש גדול מנסים לעומת שרפים לעומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך אתה ממקום עולה ברוך למותיתנו אור חדש על ציון תאיר אור חדש Al Tzion Ta'ir Or Chadash, Al Tzion Ta'ir Or Chadash, Al Tzion Ta'ir. V'nizka chulanu mehera le'oro. V'nizka chulanu mehera le'oro. Baruch atah Adonai Yotzer HaMeorot. Ava Rabbav Tanu Adonai Eloheinu Chamala Gedola V'Tera Chamalta Aleinu Avinu Malkeinu Ba'avor Avotenu Shebatchu V'cha Avinu Malkeinu Vatel Lamdemchu Kechayim Kein Techanenu Tlamdenu Avinu Av Harachaman Harachim Rachim Alinu V'ten B'libeinu Lehavin Ulahaskil Ishmoa Lilmodu Lilamed Lishmor V'lasot Ulekayem Et Kol Divrei Talmud Toratecha B'yava V'ha'erinenu V'toratecha Dahabek Leveinu Mitzvotecha Eyachei Levavinu Li'ava Uyira Et Shemecha V'lo Nebosh Le'olam Va'ed V'lo Nevosh Le'olam Va'ed Ki V'Shem Kodshecha Gadol v'nora v'tachnu Nagila v'nismecha v'yeshuatecha Avinu l'shalom yarbagan v'aretz V'tolichenu komimiut li'artzenu Yeh poel yishodata v'ana v'charta mikol v'lashon V'keratana l'shemcha gadol sela be'emet L'hodot l'cha u'yachedcha b'yahava Baruch atah Adonai Abocher b'yamo Yisrael b'yahava Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad V'yahavta et Adonai Elohecha Chol levacha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha V'hayu hadavarim ha'ele Asher anochi mitzavecha hayom alavavecha V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam V'shivtecha b'veitecha v'leftecha v'derech Shochbecha v'kumecha Ukashartam le'ot al yadecha V'hayu l'totafot b'einecha Uktavtam amas beitecha v'yishara. Adonai Elohechem Emed Emed v'yatziv v'nachon v'kayam v'yashar v'neman L'dor v'ador hu kayam u'shmo kayam v'kiso nachon u'malchuto v'emunato la'ad kayamet v'arav chayim v'kayamin Emet shatahu Adonai Eloheinu v'avotinu Malkeinu melech avotinu Goelinu goel avotinu Yisreinu tzur yeshuatenu Vodenu matzilenu elam shemecha In Elohim zulatecha Top of 114 Ezrat avotinu atahu me'olam.
Enrollment will be on the bottom of page 114, followed by the Amidah, which will begin together on page 115 before continuing silently.
From Venisa, Gadol Venora, Mashpil Geim, Umagbiya Shefalim, Motzi Asirim, Ufode Anavim, Viozer Dalim, Vion Eliamo, Vion Eliamo, Vieshava Mela Tehilot, Baruch Hu Horak Moshe Bnei Yisrael Lechanu Shira V'simcha Rabba V'yamru Chulam Mi Chamocha V'elim Adonai Mi Chamocha Nedar B'Kodesh Nahora Tehilot Ahosefele Shira Chadasha Shibechu Gehulim Leshimcha Osefatayam Yachad Kulam Hodu Lechu V'yamru Adonai Loch Le'olam. Please rise. Sur Yisrael, Kuma B'Yisrat Yisrael, Uvteknu Mecha Yehuda B'Yisrael, Go Alinu Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim Vekonei Hakol Zocher Chasdei Avo Vigo Levnei Bneihem Manshamo V'Yahava Melech Ozer Pokedu Mashiach Baruch atah Adonai Magin Avraham U'Ket Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Chayei Metim Atah Rav Loshia Morid Atah Mechalkel Chayim B'Chesed Mechayei Metim Berachamim Rabim Sohomech Noflim Verofech Olim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Yishenei Afar Michamocha Va'al Gehurot Umido Mehelach Melech Mimit Umechayei Umatzmiach Yeshua V'ne'emanat ha'chayot metim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayei hametim Nekadesh v'tzvalo Shem Shemachti Shimoto V'shmei Marom Kakatu V'yad Neviha V'kara Ze'el Ze'v'yamar Kadosh, Kadosh, Adonai Tzevaot, Melech ha'aretz kevodo. Ahaz b'kol rash gadol, dir v'chazak mashmim kol, minasim limat tzrafim, limatam baruch yomeru. Baruch kevod Adonai mimkomo. Mimchomcha malkeinu tofia, v'timloch alenu ki mechakim anachnu lach, matai timloch b'tzion b'karov, b'yameinu li'olam va'etishkon. Tidkada v'tidkadash, v'toch Yerushalayim yircha, dor v'dor, netzach unetzach netzachim. V'yeinu tirena malchutecha kadavar hamor b'shirei uzecha al yedei David Mishiach tzidkecha. Zion, Edor Vador, hallelujah. Edor Vador Nagid God Lecha, O Netzach, Netzachim Kedushatcha Nakdish, Veshivchacha, Eloheinu Mipinu, Lo Yamush, Lo Yalam Va'ed, Yel Melech Gadol V'Kadosh Atah, Baruch Atah Adonai, Ha'el Kadosh. Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Ritzei, Nuchatenu, Kadshenu, B'mitzvotecha, V'tein Chelkenu, B'toratecha, Sabenu, Mitzuvecha, Samkenu, B'yeshuatecha, V'taher Libeinu, Le'avdecha V'yemet, V'hanchilenu, Adonai Eloheinu, V'yava u'ratzon, Shabbat kodshecha, V'yanuchu v'Yisrael, Mekadeshei Shemecha, Baruch Adonai. Son imrefi vehegyon libi lefanecha Adonai tsuri vegoali Oseh shalom bimromav Uyaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru amen ve'imru amen. We'll skip to page 138. Yikada Yikada Shemei Rabba Bialma Divrachir Tevi Amlich Malchuteh V'chayechon U'v'yomechon U'v'chayed L'kol Beit Yisrael V'agala Uzman Karihi V'yamru Amen Yehesh Me Rabba Mevorach Yolam L'yomel Maya Yitbarach Yitbarach v'yistabach v'yipar v'yiram v'yaseh v'yitadar v'yitala v'yitala shemei dekudesha le'ela mikol brakata v'shirata tushpechata v'nekamata damiran b'yalma v'yimaru titkabel tzolot hon uva'uhon dechol v'yisrael kadama v'uhon divishmaya v'yimaru yehesh lama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru oseh shalom b'mamav hu yaseh shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
Shekoah. Beautiful. Does anyone want to lead the Torah service? Any takers? That was beautiful, Jeremy. Bavakasha. That was beautiful, Jeremy. Page 139.
אין כמוך באלוהים אדוני ואין כמעשיך מלכותך מלכות כל העולמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור אדוני מלך אדוני מלך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד אדוני עוז לימו ייתן אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום אהבה רחמים היטיבה ברצונך את ציון תבנה חומות ירושלים תבנה חומות ירושלים Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shmo
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shmo
Lu Adonai Romema Shemo Yachtav
Adonai Aginu
Ki kol hashamayim u'ba'alayim
one of the last parshiot. Second to last is Hazinu. It is almost entirely a not so lengthy poem by Moshe, in which he reflects on his career and the future of the people. We will have much more to say about it as we go along, but in just a moment we will begin the reading, which in the Chumashim is on page 1185. On page 1185. It is also Dvarim, chapter 32, verse 1, if you are at home and do not have a Chumash, but have a Tanakh. Vayazor v'yagim v'yoshia l'chol ha'chosim bo v'nomar Amen ha'kol avu godem l'nunu chavod la'torah kohen krav
Avraham ben Moshe Kalman HaKohen.
Avram ben Moshe Kalman HaKohen l'Aliyah Rishona Baruch Shenatan Torah l'Amo Yisrael b'Kedushato v'atem advikim l'lechem chayim kulchem chayim hayom.
Baruch Hu es Adonai HaMbarach.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMbarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher bocha bonu mikol ha'olamim v'nosan lanu as toraso. Baruch Atah Adonai nosein ha'torah.
Amen.
Amen. Hazinu hashamayim va'adabera v'tishma ha'aretz himrefi. Ya'arov kamatar mikri tizal katal imrati kis'irim alei deshe v'chirvivim alei esef ki Shem Adonai ekra avu godel le'Eloheinu Hatzur tamim polo hichol derachav mishpat el emunah ואין עוול צדיק וישר הוא שיחת לא בניו מומם דור עיקש ופתלתול על אדוני תגמלו זאת עם נבל ולא חכם הלא הוא אביך קנך הוא עשך ויחוננך
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher nosan lanu Torah semes v'chai olam notah b'sochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai nosein ha'torah.
Sarifka bat Shlomo Halevi v'chava l'Aliyah Hashenit. The reading continues, page 1186, verse 7.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bacha banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
Amen. Zechor yemot olam binu shenot dor vador she'al avicha v'yagedecha zekenecha v'yomeru lach v'chanchel elyon goyim v'hafrido b'nei adam yatzef gevulot amim lemispar b'nei Yisrael ki chelek Adonai amo Yaakov Chebel Nachalato Yimsa'ehu be'eretz midbar Uftahu Yilel Yeshimon Yesovebenhu Yevonenehu Yitrenhu Kiishon Eno Kenesher Yair Kino על גוזליו ירחף, יפרוס כנפיו, ייקחהו, יישאהו על עברתו. אדוני בדד ינחנו, ואין עמו אל אחד.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן.
שכוח. יעמוד.
Abraham Simcha.
David ben.
Don ben Abraham.
Don ben Abraham. Abraham.
Simcha.
Simcha לעלייה השלישית. Verse 13.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed. Baruch ato Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amin v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch ato Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
אמן. ירכיבהו על בהמתי ארץ, ויאכל תנובות שדי, ויניקהו דבש מסלע, ושמן מכל המשצור. חמאת בקר, וחלב צאן, עם חלב קרים, ועלים בני בשן, ועתודים, עם חלב כליות חיטה, ודם עיניו תשתה חומר. וישמן ישורון, ויבעט, שמנת אבית כסית, ויתו שלא עשהו, וינבל צור ישועתו. יקניעוהו בזרים, בתועבות יכעיסוהו, יזבחוהו. לשדים לא אלוה, אלוהים לא ידעום, חדשים מקרוב באו, לא שערום אבותיכם. צור ילדך תשי, ותשכח אל מחוללך.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'tzedekenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. שכוח. יעמוד. שרה בת ישראל, עלייה הרביעית. Verse 19, page 1189.
Baruch et Adonai habarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai habarach leolam vaed. Baruch et Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch et Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. וירא אדוני, וינעץ מכעס בניו ובנותיו, ויאמר אסתירה פני מהם, אראה מה אחריתם, כי דור תפוחת המה, בנים לא אמון בם, הם קינאוני ולא אל, כי עשוני בהבליהם. ואני אקניאם בלועם, בגוי נבל אף איסם. כי אש קדחה באפי, ותיקד עד שאול תחתית, ותאכל ארץ יבולה, ותלהק לו שדה הרים, אז פעלמו רעות, חיצי אכלה בם, מזרעיו. הולכו מרשף וכתף מרירי, ושן בהמות אשלח בם, עם חמת זוחלי עפר. מחוץ תשקל חרב, ומחדרים המה, גם הבחור, גם בתולה, יונק עם איש שיבה, אמרתי אף איהם אשביתה מאנוש זכרם לולא כעס אויב אגור פן ינקרו שרימו פן יאמרו ידינו רמה ולא אדוני פעל כל זאת כי גוי עובד עצות המה ואין בהם תבונה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נתן בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן. שבת שלום.
Ya ta'amod, ta'amod. Yona bat Farvol Aliyah HaChamishit. Before the fifth Aliyah, we'll pause for a moment and include a Misha Beirach for the Cholim, for those sick in our community. As always, I will read the list and then I will pause, and folks here or online can add names of those for whom they are praying this morning. Misha Beirach Avotenu Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel Beleah Hu Yivarech v'Rapei et Yonatan ben Etel vet Zipporah bat Yita vet Rita Vasquez vet Rachel bat Rivka vet Naphtali Herzl ben Esther vet Avram ben An vet Leah Nechama bat Rachel vet Daniel ben Naomi vet Shmuel ben Etta vet Harry Silverman vet Liba bat Crandall, vet Perel Basha bat Chia, vet Dov Yosef ben Yeta, vet David ben Chaba, vet Chaba bat Perel, vet Livia Margorlit bat Alana Devora, vet Josephine Arkwright, vet Alex Breskin, vet David ben Israel, vet Edward Last, vet Gerald Russello, vet Roberta Laban, vet Paula Silverman, vet Don ben Etel, vet Adina bat Liorit, vet Michaela Devora, vet Ann Perlman, vet Steve Oxgasi, vet Etel bat Rivka, vet Yocheved bat Frida, vet Eitan ben Esther, vet Esther bat Bela, vet
Peter Burns.
Linda Crafton, Margaret Grossman.
Bernard Carter.
and anyone online. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleim Lachazikam Rapotam Vayishlach Lamera Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf Shabbat Hu Hi Milizok Refuah Krova Alavo Hashtav Agala Zman Karif Eno Mahar Amen. The reading continues, page 1190, verse 29. Dvarim 32:29.
Baruch Adonai Hambarak.
Baruch Adonai Hambarak Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarak Leolam Vaed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher baruchu banu mikol ha'amin v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
אמן. לו חכמו ישכילו זאת, יבינו לאחריתם. אחד ירדוף 1,000 ושניים יניסו רבבה. אם לא קיצורם מחרם, אדוני הזכירם. כי לא קיצורנו צורם, ואויבינו פלילים. כי מגפן סדום גפנם, ומשדמות עמורה, ענבי מו ענבי ראש, אשקלות מרורות למו, חמת תנינים ינם, וראש פתנים אכזר. הלא הוא כמוס עמדי, חתום באוצרותיי. לי נקם ושילם, לעת תמות רגלם, כי קרוב יום אדם, לחש עתידות למו, כי ידין אדוני עמו, ועל עבדיו יתנחם, כי יראה כי אזלת יד, ואפס עצור ועזוב. ואמר אלוהימו, צור חסי יובו, אשר חלב זבחימו יאכלו, ישתו יין נסיכם, יקומו ויעזרוכם, יהי עליכם סטרה, ראו אתה, כי אני הוא, ואין אלוהים עמדי, אני אמית ואחיה, מחצתי ואני ארפא, ואין מידי מציל.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נתת בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן. שכוח, שבת
שכוח, תעמוד. Anna Malka bat Mendel, the Aliyah Hashishit, page 1192, verse 40.
Baruch Adonai Habarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torto. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. כי אשא אל שמים ידי ואמרתי, חי אנוכי לעולם, אם שנותי ברק חרבי, ותאחז במשפט ידי, אשיב נקם לצרי, ולמשנאי אשלם, אשכיר חיצי מדם, וחרבי תאכל בשר, מדם חלל בשביה, מראש פרעות אויב. הרנינו גויים עמו, כי דם עבדיו יקום. ונקם ישיב לצריו, וכיפר אדמתו עמו.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam notah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. שכוח, שבת שלום.
Ya'amod.
Why is it double columns and then it's double columns?
Raphael ben Chanina, l'Aliyah Hashvi'it.
Baruch hu et Adonai habarach.
Baruch Adonai
Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai habarach leolam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. ויבוא משה וידבר את כל דברי השירה הזאת באוזני העם, הוא והושע בן נון. ויכל משה לדבר את כל הדברים האלה אל כל ישראל. ויאמר עליהם, שימו לבבכם לכל הדברים אשר אנוכי מעיד בכם היום, אשר תצוום את בניכם לשמור לעשות את כל דברי התורה הזאת. כי לא דבר ריק הוא מכם, כי הוא חייכם. ובדבר הזה תאריכו ימים על האדמה אשר אתם עוברים את הירדן, שמה לרשתה, וידבר אדוני אל משה בעצם היום הזה לאמור עלי אל ההר העברים הזה הר נבו אשר בארץ מואב אשר על פני יריחו וראה את ארץ כנען אשר אני נותן לבני ישראל לאחוזה ומות בהר אשר אתה עולה שמה להיאסף אל עמך כאשר מת אהרון אחיך בהור ההר ויאסף אל עמיו על אשר מעלתם בי בתוך בני ישראל במי מריבת קדש מדבר צין על אשר לא קידשתם אותי בתוך בני ישראל כי מנגד תראה את הארץ ושמה לא תבוא אל הארץ אשר אני נותן לבני ישראל.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen.
Please rise.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמך בה ועלמא דברה קירותי לימליך מלכותי בכל יום וביום אחד ובחיי בית ישראל בהגנה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמך מבורך לעולם לעולמי יתברך וישתבח ויפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמת קודשו ברכו לעילה מן כל ברכתה בשירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן.
Do you call me up? Doesn't matter where you call me up from, really.
יעמוד אב
Benjamin Yonatan,
בנימין יונתן,
Ben Akiva Yitzchak,
בן עקיבא יצחק,
Shoshana.
ושושנה בתיר.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. וידבר אדוני אל משה בעצם היום הזה לאמור עלי אל ההר העברים הזה הר נבו אשר בארץ מואב אשר על פני יריחו וראה את ארץ כנען אשר אני נותן לבני ישראל לאחוזה ומות בהר אשר אתה עולה שמה להיאסף אל עמך כאשר מת אהרון אחיך בהור ההר ויאסף אל עמיו על אשר מעלתם בי בתוך בני ישראל במי מריבת קדש מדבר סין על אשר לא קידשתם אותי בתוך בני ישראל, כי מנגד תראה את הארץ, ושמה לא תבוא אל הארץ, אשר אני נותן לבני ישראל.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. יעמדו המגביה והגולל וכל הקהל. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה
לפני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. תורה, 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 תורה,
ציווה לנו משה. תורה, 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 ציווה לנו משה. תורה, 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 ציווה לנו משה. תורה, 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 ציווה לנו משה. מורשה קהילת יעקב, מורשה קהילת יעקב, מורשה קהילת יעקב, תורה ציווה לנו משה. You may be seated. We will, in just a moment, read the Haftarah, but I thought before we did, in lieu of a sermon today, I thought we would do a little bit of learning together. So it's sort of it's a bit like a preview for one of the classes that, thank you, Jacqueline. It's a bit like a preview for one of the things that I'm going to start teaching in the fall. And, there's been a lot of sermonizing over the last few days, and so I thought it would be nice to take a little break from you guys hearing me drone on about things. And so Wayne, we'll need our Chumash. So if you have your Chumash, we might look at a few things, so you can sort of keep that with you. So if you noticed, so I'm on the first page here, and what this is I translated this. It's one of the pages of Nechama Leibovitz, or one of her Gilionot. So Nechama Leibovitz, for those of you who don't know, who never studied Nechama Leibovitz before, she was a giant in the field of biblical scholarship, but also really even more so biblical teaching in the 20th century in Israel. She was my teacher's teacher, and she was also the teacher of tens of thousands of people during her long life. She's an interesting person. She was born in 1905 in Latvia, and then she was educated to a sort of a traditional but also modern family, and then she was educated in Berlin, where she worked towards her PhD, and then she immigrated to Israel with her family in 1930. It's an illustrious family. Her brother Yeshayahu Leibovitz is an important philosopher, and she became a professor of Tanakh at the university in Tel Aviv, and she taught the university courses to college students, but she also began at some point in the late 40s, early 50s, making these mimeographed Parsha worksheets, basically, which she would then distribute to whoever asked for them. Like she would, there are stories and they're true stories. Like she would, she'd be riding in a cab and said, "Oh, I'm this teacher, Nechama Leibovitz, here's this Parsha worksheet. If you want, do it and send it back to me and I'll, grade it for you," basically. And she did this over many, many years. I forgot exactly the year of her death, but she lived a long life, and she did this over many years. And by the end of her life, or sort of the height of her career, she was corresponding with thousands and thousands of Israelis. every week. And she would apparently, the stories go, I don't know, does anyone here ever do a Nechama Levi's Gilion, like an original one? Probably not. But she would apparently comment on them, individually, and she would send them back to people, thousands of people. So she was a really, really very influential in encouraging and inspiring study of Tanakh, and mostly study of Parsha, along with traditional commentators in Israeli society in general. So was a really extraordinary person and important teacher, and she, there's statements in the Talmud about, if you raise up students, she truly raised up tens and tens of thousands of students. And her method was basically the method of the Mefarshim, basically the medieval and early modern Bible commentators. Basically what they would do is they would, the classic question is, Ma kashela Rashi, right? What is bothering Rashi in this verse, right? What is the thing that's not entirely clear? What motivates Rashi's comment? And basically her method, and she said this throughout her entire career, was that nothing was her own. She didn't have any perspective, she didn't have any pedagogy, she didn't have anything she wanted to say. Of course, whenever a teacher says that, you'd be a little bit skeptical. She did have a method, and she had a profoundly influential one. But she basically said all she does is teach the commentators. She identifies, a verse that's troublesome, or not, doesn't have to be troublesome, interesting, calls for some kind of explanation. And she encourages people both to think through what exactly are the things that are motivating the comments. And then she brings commentators. So the thing that motivates this particular Gilion of Nechama Leibovitz, it was listed as part of the Gilion for Hazinu, which is what we just read, though it really is commenting sort of on the phenomenon of Hazinu, which was this: when we raised the Torah up, you saw there was the Torah wasn't written like in the normal block, the normal long block parchments usual. It was written as a poem, right? It was laid out a little bit differently. And this particular lesson of hers, which I didn't really adapt at all, it's mostly just my translations of the sources she brought, is about the phenomenon of that song. So why is there that song there? Why does Moshe, do this poem at the end? What is that all about? And the verses, they're both on the sheet here, but they're also in at the end of Vayelech, Parshat Vayelech, which we actually read, which leads right into Hazinu. The last words of Vayelech, which are on 1179, though I can read them for you. Vayidaber Moshe be'oznei kol kahal Yisrael et divrei hashira hazot ad tumam. Then Moshe recited the words of this poem to the very end, in the hearing of the whole congregation of Israel. And a little bit earlier, Moshe tells the people, Ve'ata kitvu lachem at hashira hazot. You guys need to write down this particular song. And so the sheet is going to be about what exactly those verses mean, and what the song is, and why it's there. But I'm curious, just as an opening question, why do you think Moshe switches to poetry at the end of his life? Or to song, maybe? Why such a different mode? This is like the last thing he's going to tell the people. Yeah, Adam.
Well, with me, when there's a song and there's a melody or a chant, it sticks in your memory much better. So you engage both sides of your brain in remembering. And so one side can trigger the other.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Adam said, just for the people online, Adam said that there's a way in which it triggers more sides of your brain, and so you remember it. If it's an important thing, if you put it to music, or if you if there's a song, poetic aspect of it, you remember it more, it sticks in your head more, which I think is very true. And it's always easier to learn lyrics if there's a tune, right, than if there's not. At least it is for me. And actually, there's going to be a comment that we're going to see that talks about from the Ramban. That he's going to say that originally when the Israelites read this section, and it's the third commandment. You can read it now if you want. We'll talk a little more about it in a second. But when the Israelites originally read this section, they actually set it to music. So, which is interesting, right? Because I think that over time, and of course, Dina just read beautifully for us, as always, at a challenging reading, which has lots of weird forms and poetic forms and kol hakavod. But when we think about Torah reading now, we think about a very specific and sort of regimented form of musicality. It's always exactly the same. Or, I mean, the notes change a little bit, but it always sounds more or less the same. And the idea is to get it, exactly right. And the idea is that all of the Torah should sound the same, because none of the Torah is more important than any of the other parts of the Torah, right? Well, it seems like, at least according to the Ramban, this was not originally true. In other words, that there were sections of the Torah that were, embellished with musical accompaniment. So let's say, PJC, we have a particularly, there's a few psukim that we just really love at PJC. Well, maybe at the PJC, we give those a little, some timbrels or some violin or something like that. And there are, in fact, people today who are trying to recover these aspects of the Torah service, whether it's reading the Torah both in the original and translation so that people could actually understand it as they're hearing it, or whether it's adding sort of instrumental embellishments to aspects of the Torah. There are people who are trying these kinds of things, which is, interesting. Yeah, Sandra.
So I understand what you're saying, but it seems to me that whenever we have these songs, the metaphors always seem the same. We're always talking about the waves and the grass, and we're resorting to very, they're not new themes. And to me, the narratives are much more complicated and interesting. If I were to remember anything, it wouldn't be the song, necessarily.
Interesting, right? So Sandra makes the point that, actually the things that are easier to remember are stories. Like the narratives in Breshit. We can all rattle off probably something like the story of the binding of Isaac, because it's such an amazing, crazy, powerful story, right? Whereas a poem which returns to different kinds of poetic themes, and you're right, biblical poetry, they're not all the same, but they return to similar kinds of themes, and there's not like a beginning, there's not such a narrative thrust to them, right? They're harder to remember, which I think may bring back to sort of Adam's point, which is that probably these were originally experienced in a different way. I mean, they were experienced probably more like, we hear our favorite song, and some songs have a narrative thrust to them, but some of them are just sort of, exploring ideas. Like there's a lot of songs like, I love you, baby, but it's like, well, they're all kind of different. Yeah. Adam.
So it also occurs to me that music reaches us in very powerful emotional base to our core, and gives us sometimes an understanding of that which can't be explained by words. So, for example, if you watch a scene in a movie and they change the music that's under the underscore, you can get a completely different feeling from that same set of pictures, just because the music is different. I think this is the same sort of thing, that music can help embellish your emotional attachment to the words.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true, and I think maybe that's an aspect of what Moshe is trying to do at the end of his life, right? It's an emotional. Yeah, Anna.
Just to follow on what you said, I think in this case we can't hear instrumentation, right? But the way the words are laid out, they touch your feelings more than your rational. Like the narrative will be like, this happened before, this came after, and in the poem it's not that, like it's not by time, right? Time is not an issue, place is not an issue, and it's not touching us in that rational logic way. It works in our feelings, and I think the commandment Hazinu, right? Hazinu comes from the word ozen, which is also comes from the root of being equilibrated.
Being what?
To equilibrate, to be no. He's stable.
Ozen. Oh, like a weight.
Right? That's Hazinu, Aleph Zainun is two. And
Right.
so I think the power of words laid in that way, that they don't follow grammar, they don't follow a structure. They have a structure, but it's not a logical one. It works in a different level of our being, and it stays with us. That experience stays with us.
So just to recapitulate, and then Adam, just to recapitulate for a few folks online, Anna is basically saying, I won't capture all the nuance, but that poetry or song can work on a non-rational level or the seat of emotion in a way that that prose does not. Yeah, Adam.
So I just had a little epiphany.
Great.
When you were talking about. So what I always tell us is that the Torah is not a linear time recollection.
Right.
And then it occurs to me that the rhythm that we as humans are very responsive to rhythm. And so the rhythm of the chant creates a time basis for us that helps us with the understanding.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Because we need, that's something that we can really hold on to. Rhythm. It's, anytime you see, I'm singing, he's,
right.
The rhythm out on well, the rhythm provides that thread of time that helps us understand.
Yeah, very interesting. Adam says that like the rhythm of something provides time for the Torah, which by nature doesn't exactly have time, which is a core interpretive principle of the ancient rabbis. There's ein mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah. There's no, basically that the Torah, there's no forward and backward in the Torah. The Torah sometimes plays with time in disorienting ways. Yeah, Rabbi.
So there's another way that, another element of music, which is antiphony, call and response, that many congregations practice with certain readings. And one of them is another poem, the Song of the Sea, where the congregation recites a line, and then, the Torah reader, you're supposed to hear every word the Torah reader says, so it's done separately, but everybody participates. So the congregation recites a line, and then the Torah reader does it. And also, I don't know, again, Simchat Torah is coming up. Many congregations do that with the end of every day of creation. I don't know if that's done here, but
I've never done Simchat Torah here before, so but I mean, yes, I'm familiar with that practice. Yeah.
Changes too for those lines.
Right. Yeah.
And I have actually we go between tropes, two different trope systems to highlight the penitential aspect of the
Yeah, no, I think, Dean, you're pointing out some really important things. One of which is, I'll just highlight is, and this is related to the concept of, musical accompaniment to Torah, just this call and response. Probably originally, Torah reading was considerably more dynamic and interactive for the kahal than we have it now. And you said rightly, of course, halachically, the way the halacha developed, because there's this theological idea that the Torah is, we want to get it exactly right, because that's God's word to Moshe, right? Well, so there developed a halacha around that, you want to get the Torah exactly right, and you want to hear dafka, the voice of the reader at all times, which sort of is in tension to some extent with the dynamism that was probably originally, my guess is, part of reading the Torah out in the market, because people are out in the market and doing stuff. Yeah, Andre had a question.
Yeah, my question was about the Parsha of Shabbat, that has the Song of the Sea. Is the Song of the Sea written out in the same way? I know that it's actually kind of engraved within the parchment, so you can actually see the waves, which to me is fascinating. But is it also written out in the same way?
Not the same way. It's different. Yeah, it's
black and white print.
It's also written in a distinctive way, but it's not quite exactly the same way. So let's look at a few comments, and then obviously keep talking. So we'll look at Rashi first, and Rashi's comment is very short, but it leads into a question which maybe we didn't ask, but maybe we should have, but at least is there in Rashi's mind. So Rashi's commentary on the word "this song," and by the way, if you've never studied traditional commentators, the way it works is usually, the way it's laid out is there's a dibur matchil, which is the opening, literally means the word that opens, but it's sort of the word exactly that Rashi's commenting on. So if you look in a Mikrot Gedolot, a traditional commentator's Bible, you'll see around the margins, this song, and it'll either be in bold or whatever, and it's a quote from the verse, right? And Moshe wrote Hashira Hazot, right? And on that verse, Rashi says Ha'azinu Hashamayim. In other words, the song, he's identifying what the song is. So the song that Moshe is talking about there, or the song that Moshe wrote down there, he's just saying, yeah, that's Ha'azinu, which is what we just read. So the thing that is bothering Rashi, what's bothering Rashi here? What's the thing you might have thought without Rashi's, yes, Ron?
Rashi wants to identify this as a thing, as a separate unit of concept.
Right.
That you have to see in the context of the whole Torah, and you have to see it as a unit all by itself, and you have to say, look, folks, this is it.
Right. So Rhonda says Rashi wants to identify the song as a unit of text, or as the ancient rabbis would say, as a sugya, or as professors would say, as a pericope. It's a unit of text, okay, that has its own integrity and its own, its own themes and whatever, right? But as opposed to what, though? Like what? Rashi is usually commenting when he thinks there's something wrong you might have thought if he didn't comment. That's usually why he's commenting. Sometimes he just wants to say something, but usually that's why he's commented. What's the wrong thing you might have thought? That we're going to see some of the other commentators actually do think.
I was just going to say, in case you didn't get it the first time.
In case you didn't get it the first time. Right. So,
because this is a summary in a way, or a restatement in a way. It doesn't have as Sandra said, it doesn't have the dramatic text and the events in it. It has an interpretive and analytical frame.
Right. Maybe so. It's possible. I think, at least based on some of the other comments that seem to argue with Rashi, I think Rashi is the interpretation that he, I think, wants to argue against is that maybe Hashira Hazot refers to the entire Torah. In other words, maybe when Moshe talks about my song, and you should write for yourself this song, maybe he's referring to the entire Torah. Now, I think that is what Rashi is arguing against, only because some other commentators say that's precisely what it means. So if you look at Rambam, so in Mishnah Torah, which is the last source on the first page, Rambam says, there is a positive commandment that requires each and every Jew to write a complete Torah for himself. By the way, did you know that was a commandment? Has anyone? So, it is, in theory. The way most people fulfill this commandment is when their shul, gets a Torah together or something, they donate, $36 to, or whatever it is, to hold the scribe's hand while he or she makes the mark. And then you count it as you fulfilled, the mitzvah because you did a part of it, right? And a part of it is, inexorably important because without the part, you can't have the whole. And so you check off the mitzvah that way. Not everyone, the Rambam doesn't require everyone to be like a sofer. But look what he says. That's sort of a parenthetical to what the main point is now. Look what he says is the source of that law. As it is written, and now write for yourself this song. In other words, when he reads verse 19, and now write for yourself this song, right? Ve'ata kitvu lachem et hashira hazot, which we thought, or Rashi thought, refers to Hazinu. In other words, Moshe says, listen, I'm going to lay down some sweet melodies. I'm going to lay down like some sweet, I'm in flow right now, and I want you to take this down, right? In other words, that song, right? No, Rambam says it means Moshe's song is the entire Torah, which yields a very different sense, I think, of what Torah is and what... and how does that... I don't know. Any thoughts about that? Yeah. David?
Even when you say that, it's feel like there's no end. I mean, obviously the Torah has an end, but it's beginning and end, but it almost seems endless. And the Torah just leads to it, we recycle it every year.
That's true. That's true.
So it's like there's no real beginning, there's no end. You want peace.
Right. No, that's true. And you keep writing it. You write it in a cycle, right? And we do. I mean, that's true, sort of. We're writing it for... The only reason why you have it now is because people just kind of, they kept copying it over. So flip the page. We'll look at one or two... Some of these ideas we've touched on before, but one of them is... And there are two interesting kind of ideas that come out of this. So one is from the Ralbag. This is Rabbi Levi ben Gershon, who's a 14th century commentator. And he says, it is clarified afterward that this song refers to the entire Torah from start to finish. And probably it's clarified by the Ramban, right? Because when Jews read Torah, I mean, you can of course go back and do the Protestant thing where it's like solo scriptura, you in the text. That's a valid way of reading Torah. But for the most part, when Jews read Torah in a devotional way, they read it as refracted through millennia of conversations. So the Ralbag says no. I mean, I guess he probably knew the Rashi too, but for whatever reason, he says no. It's clarified that actually Hashirah Hazot means this song. And Moshe spoke the words of this song so that the whole assembly of Israel could hear it until it was completed. This teaches that without a doubt, write yourself this song refers to the entire Torah, along with the song. Right? And then he says, this is the point that I touched on a little bit earlier, after Rabbi Sharkel made her comment about, we have to hear the voice of the reader. Far be it for the Torah to insist that all of Israel pay attention to this song and to its writing more than any of the other compulsory words of Torah. So there's a basic theological idea that every single pasuk in the Torah is just as important as every single other pasuk in the Torah. So, for instance, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, is every single bit as important, as a verse that just says Vaydaber Adonai al Moshe lemor, every single bit as important as the laws against not mixing linen and wool, every single bit as important as the laws not to murder, and all of these things are fundamentally, inherently of the same and infinite value, and therefore we should never imply that one is more important than the other. I'm curious how this strikes you. I mean, this is a rather...
It can't have been meant literally true, because nobody would believe that.
Nobody would believe what I just said?
Yeah, nobody would believe that not mixing linen and wool is as important as not murdering, adultery, iron.
You think nobody would really believe that in their heart, of hearts?
It's not meant literally true.
Well, I will say I agree with you, Jack. I mean, in my experience, it's hard for me to get into a headspace where I literally believe, and I will say that I don't think I do literally believe that those are of equal importance, but certainly throughout history, lots and lots of, big, famous, way more famous rabbis than me and Jewish thinkers or whatever have insisted that no, they are in fact of equal value somehow. We may not understand why they are, but they are. And they would insist that. Now, whether or not they really believe that in their heart of hearts, I don't know. I don't know. It's hard.
But there's literal meaning, like how you should live, and then there's an aspirational, transcendent equation of these, right? I mean, it's not always the same. Those two levels of experience are not going to be the same.
No, that's true. That's for sure. Joel?
There are songs, there are poems, there are stories. And they're different. I have trouble envisioning Leviticus as a song.
Yeah, me too.
So song, to me, the word song was chosen for a different experience. Because the song itself, this song and others similar to it in the Torah, they're written differently, they're interpreted differently, they're set up differently. So that's why I don't see the whole Torah as a song.
So I think you're probably right on the pshat level. In other words, that probably the plain sense contextual meaning of this verse is that it refers to Hazinu. I mean, that's kind of, saying it refers to the whole Torah is kind of like, as my old Gemara professor, Meir Rabinowitz, said, I guess he is somewhat old, but he's also a wonderful professor. He said, that's like saying touch your ear and you go like this, right? It's a little bit, but I'll get to you in a second, Jeremy. But, so to your point about it's hard to imagine Leviticus as a song. Well, so this is our last commentator, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, who is a very important 19th century commentator who wrote a sefer called Ha'amek Davar, which means the depth of the matter. In Nedarim, Daf 38, the verse, write for yourself this song, is said to refer to the entire Torah. Oh, so it's actually earlier than Rashi, I forgot. So actually that idea that it refers to the entire Torah, Rashi is taken from the Gemara. But the Torah is not written in poetry. Right? This is Joel's point. But this is what he says. Look what he says. But still, you must admit, it has the nature and charm of poetry. For it is well known that the flowery words of a poem or song are different from a prose composition. Because in a poem, the meaning is not entirely clear, this is what Anna was saying, as it is in a prose composition, and one needs to make annotations in the margins, i.e. this couplet refers to this aspect of the composition and that couplet refers to that. And this is not simply a matter of creative interpretation, rather it is the nature of poetry. Right? So the activity of interpreting a poem or song, it's not just that you're enjoying that process. No, it is built into the encounter with that thing that you engage in this kind of interpretive creativity. And moreover, for one who understands the meaning of the poem well, how sweet is the language of the poem and its intricacies, much more so than for the person who does not understand the composition. For then studying the poem will only confuse matters, leading to erroneous assumptions, etc., etc. Thus is the nature of Torah. For the story it tells is not readily explained. Instead, it demands footnotes and explanations and careful attention to the language. And this is not merely a matter of interpretation. Rather, it is the plain meaning of Scripture. In other words, right? It's not just that when we're doing the activity of midrash, like when we give a drasha or an interpretation or whatever, it's not simply that we're being creative and having fun with the text. No. The text itself, its turbidity and its vagaries, right, and the fact that it's not entirely clear, this is in fact inherent to what the text is trying to do. Meaning it wants you to engage and go deep and, have a 1,000-year-long conversation about what the text actually means. Like a poem. Says Ha'amek Davar. Which I think is, to me, that's a pretty rad idea. Jeremy, yeah.
And I don't think we view Moses as a poet. You know what I mean? I don't think that's what
I agree.
His major contribution is, but it's interesting that he recites a poem here, and he is warning the Jewish people kind of not to do what he did, because right after the poem, if you skip ahead, what we read today, was the portion ends on a negative, where Moses cannot enter Israel. It's almost like you're wishing for a positive. This is a long, illustrious life. This is the gateway to Israel, and after this poem, it ends on a negative note. And then after the poem, if you skip ahead, it's like Moses blessing each of the tribes of Israel.
Right.
So between this negative, you have it's almost like Moses is reciting the poem to preempt God's this curse almost of not being able to enter Israel, and also just lift himself above a little bit in anticipation of this, because then after that last line, which you don't feel great about, it or ended that way.
Right.
And then Moses first with the poem, and then he blesses the tribes of Israel. You get this part, you get this part, this is going to be blessed. So it's a little bit of a framing.
Right.
Something that he did purposely.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think your point about how we don't think of Moshe as a poet, maybe this is a nice segue a little bit into the Haftarah, but which is David's song, and we do think of David as a poet, or at least he's characterized that way. No, I think it's true. I think we don't think of Moshe as a poet. I don't, right? I think of Moshe as a political leader, basically, and a prophet. That's how he's characterized, and a prophet who, these sources actually didn't get into this, but one of the classic midrashic answers for why Abraham switches to poetry at the end is because there's an idea that throughout most of Moshe's career, he saw his prophecy was through what's called the aspeklaria sheme'ira, the clear lens. So unlike Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu and all the other prophets who speak in strange, mysterious poems, Moshe actually spoke with God face to face, and so we get like a direct line. And then at the end of his life, he's sort of diminished in a certain way, actually, and so he has to sort of revert or to the level of a normal prophet. Yeah, Adam, one more thing.
I see it completely differently. I think Moshe is growing all the way up until his death. Earlier, he's speaking in prose, and to me, it's both a phenomenal way to send off. It's like an artistic growth, him as a human being, reaching his full fulfillment, that he can now encapsulate all of this in poetry.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with you. I agree with you, Adam. I think the Mekdevar does too. Adam said that actually that the poetry, not that it's a level, it's a kind of diminishment. It's actually represents growth and poetic growth. And actually, I mentioned a comment last night from Avraham of Sachchav, who's a 20th century Hasidic Rebbe, who said actually this was the first thing Moshe said in his own voice. That all of the other time he was sort of he was channeling basically. But here Moshe actually finds his own voice, which is a really sort of a beautiful and profound thing that it took that long for Moshe to find his own voice. But sometimes it takes a long time. Well, okay, one more, yeah.
All right, so I just want to say I just adore this last commentator, Untitled Chapter.
Yes.
His approach is to come up with a commandment for us based on how we interpret. So he's not going into a verse in the Torah, really. He's going into our creative process of how we approach things, which I find is kind of empowering to the people, we ourselves, because of our creative and analytical ability to interpret, therefore can extend the commandment from the song to the entire Torah, because it's we who actually interpret a poem and the Torah in the same way. So I find this very, very interesting, because he's not delving into different verses to come up with his argument. He's actually analyzing human beings and saying, because of the way we work, this is the commandment.
It's true, and maybe this is a way of saying the same thing, because maybe a human being is a Torah, and a Torah is a human being, and all these things. But he goes farther than that. He doesn't just say it's about our creative, I don't think. I think he goes even farther. He says, not only is that something that we do that's creative, but he says, right, Ella yesh la'asot ha'arud u'prushim v'diktukei halashon. You're supposed to make all of these different footnotes and perushim and explaining what the language means. V'lo nikra darush. That's not just like you're being creative. No. Ella kachu pshat hamikra. Rather, that is actually what the text wants as well. In other words, so maybe it means that the text mirrors us, right? The text, like us, sort of demands this kind of, interpretive, conversational activity, like what we all just did now. So kol hakavod for doing exactly what the Torah wants, at least exactly what I think the Torah wants. So just this was sort of something similar to the Lunch and Learn that'll be on Thursdays, where we'll look at, hopefully, with God's help, each week we'll pick a different Gilyonah of the great Nechama Leibovitz, and we'll work through it. They're not, and I hope it'll be really fun. The Haftarah for Parshat Hazinu is from the great poet of Jewish tradition, King David. Unlike Moshe's poem, which is sort of retrospective and a little bit prospective about sort of God's relationship with the people, David's poem is actually much more, he shifts to a more personal mode. It's mostly about his triumph over his enemies and God's involvement of that, sort of a shift from, the public, maybe political persona of a person like Moshe to the, David is also a public person, of course, but also is characterized throughout the David stories as a great poet and a person of profound and profoundly complicated inner resources and landscape as well. So it provides an interesting contrast, though it is also similar. And that is also a song. It's on page 1196. It's from the book of Shmuel, chapter 22, verse 1. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav v'divrei hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah Moshe abdo v'Yisrael amo v'emet b'tzedek. V'daber David l'Adonai et divrei hashira hazot bayom. Hatzil Adonai ota mikaf kol oivav mikaf Shaul. Vayomar Adonai sali sudati falti li Elohei tzuri echeseboho magini vekeren yishi miskabi nusihi moshi mechamas toshieni mulal ekra Adonai umeoyevai vashea Ki avafuni mispere ma'abed nachalei b'li'al yevatuni chevlei she'ol sahabuni kidmuni mokshe ma'abed V'tzar li akra Adonai v'Elohai akra v'yishma mehechalo koli v'shavati v'oznav v'yidgash v'tirash ha'aretz mostod hashamayim yirgazu v'yidgashu ki charalo alashan be'apo v'esh mipiv tochel gechalim v'aru bimenu v'yit shamayim v'hayirad v'arafel tachad raglav v'yirkav al kruv v'yaho v'yirah al kanfei ruach v'yashed choshech zvivotav sukot chashrat mayim ave shechakim Minoga negdo baruch achalesh Yar'e min hashamayim Adonai v'elyon yiten kolo V'yishlach itzihim v'yfitzehem barak v'yahom V'yera'u afi keyam yigalu mosdo tevel Begarat Adonai minishmat ruach hapo Yishlach mimarahom yikacheni yamsheni mimayim rabim yatzileni me'oyevi oz misnahai ki amtu mimenu Yekadmuni b'yom eidihi v'ahi Adonai mishan li v'yotze lemerchavoti yechalitzeni ki chafetz bihi Yigmeleni Adonai ketzidkatihi kevor yadi yashiv li ki shamarti derachei Adonai v'lo rashati me'Elohai Ki kol mishpatav lenegdihi v'chukotav lo asur mimeni v'ehyeh tamim lo v'eshtam raha me'avoni v'yashev Adonai li ketzidkatihi kevori leneged einav עם הסיר תתחסד, עם גיבור תמים תתמם, עם נבהר תתבהר, ועם עיקש תתפעל, ואת עם עני תושיע, ועיניך על רמים תשביל. כי אתה נרי אדוני, ואדוני יגיע חשקי. כי בך רוץ גדוד, באלוהי אדלג שור. האל תמים דרכו, אמרת אדוני צרופה, מגן הוא לכל החוסים בו. כי מאהל מבלעדי אדוני, ומצור מבלעדי אלוהינו. האל מעוזי חיל, ויתר תמים דרכי. משבר רגלי כהילוד, ועל במותי יעמידני. מלמד ידי למלחמה, וניחת קשת נחושה זרותי. ותיתן לי מגן אישך, וענותך תרבני. תרחיב צדי תחתני, ולא מדו קרסולי. ארדפה אויבי ואשמידם, ולא אשוב עד כלותם. ואכלם ואמחצם, ולא יקומון, ויפלו תחת רגלי. ותעזרני חיל למלחמה, תכריע כמי תחתני. ואויבי תתה לי עורף, משנאי ועצמיתם. ישוב ואין מושיע אל אדוני, ולא אנם. אשכחם כעפר ארץ, כתית חוצות אדיקם ארכאם. ותפלטני מריבי עמי, תשמרני לראש גויים. עם לא ידעתי יעבדוני, בני נכר ידחשו לי, לשמוע אוזן ישמעו לי. בני נכר יבולו ויחגרו ממסגרותם. חי אדוני וברוך צורי, וירום אלוהי צור אישי. האל הנותן נקמות לי, ומוריד עמים תחתני, ומוציא מאויבי, ומקמי תרום ממני. מאיש חמסים תצילני, על כן אודך אדוני בהגויים, ולשמך זמר. מגדול ישועות מלכו, ועושה חסד למשיחו, לדוד ולזרעו עד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל עמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך, ודבר אחד מדבריך אחור לא ישוב ריקם. כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הנאמן בכל דבריו. ורחם על ציון כי בית חיינו, ולעלובת נפש תושיע במהרה בימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני משמח ציון בבניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא עבדך, ובמלכות בית דוד משיחך, במהרה ביבוא ויגיע ליבנו. על כיסאו לא ישב זר, ולא ינחלו רחם את כבודו, כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יכבה נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן דוד, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Page 148. יקום פורקן מן שמיה, חיינו וחסד ורחמי וחיים. מי שברך אבותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, שרה רבקה, רחל ולאה, הוא יברך את כל הקהל הקדוש הזה, עם כל קהילות הקודש, הם ובניהם ובנותיהם וכל אשר להם. ומי שמאחדים בבתי כנסיות לתפילה, ומי שבאים בתוכם להתפלל, ומי שנותנים נר למאור ביין לקידוש ולהבדלה, ופת לאורחים וצדקה לעניים. וכל מי שעוסקים בתורכי ציבור ועניין ארץ ישראל באמונה, הקדוש ברוך הוא ישלם שכרם, ויסיר מהם כל מחלה וירפא לכל גופם, ויסלח לכל עוונם, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם, עם כל ישראל אחיהם, ונאמר, Amen. Please rise for prayer for our country on page 148. Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, and for all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your Spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds form a common bond in true harmony to banish hatred and bigotry and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are pride and glory of our country. May this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen. Page 149, a prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu Shabashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu, Hagen Aleya be'avrat chastecha, Ufros Aleya sukat shlomecha, Ushlach orcha v'amitcha l'roshea, Sareya b'yotzea, V'taknem be'etza tova milfanecha, Chazek et yidei migineg eretz kodshenu, V'hanchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, V'ateret nitzachon teatrem, V'natata shalom ba'aretz, V'simchat olam liyoshveya, V'nomar, Amen. Page 151. Ashrei Yoshrei Veitecha Od Yalu Chasela Shem Shekach Lo Shem. Tila Tadanai Daber Pi Virek Kavas Hashem Kochelam Baed. Vanach Nurach Yamet Havir Olam. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Shem Adonai. Kin is Gab Shemo Levado. Hodo. Kavod Yirim Adonai El Ma'im Rabim Kol Adonai Ba'koach Kol Adonai Behadar Kol Adonai Shaver Arazim Vaishaver Adonai Edar Zehal Vana Vayakinim Kemo Egel Lebanon Besirion Kemo Ben Reimi Kol Adonai Kotem Lavotesh Kol Adonai Yachil Midbar Yachil Adonai Midbar Kadesh Kol Adonai Echol Elayalo Lechesov Yerod Uvechalo Kulo Meher Kavod Adonai Lamabul Yashavayeshev Adonai Melech Leolam Adonai Oz Le'amo Yitem Adonai Yevarech et Amo L'Shalom Uvnucho Yom Shuvah. Ki lekach tov natati lachem torati al tazovu Eitz Chaim Lemachazikima V'tomcheha Meushar D'racheha Darchei Noam V'chol Netivoteha Shalom Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Musaf is on page 155. Yigada Shemir Rabba Be'almadim Ra Kirute Be'amlich Malchute Be'chayechon U'B'yom Echon U'Chayed Echol Beit Yisrael V'Galav Izman Garim Imru Amen Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Lo Me'omayam Yibarach V'Ishtabach V'Par V'Droma V'Naseh Vidala 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 shmei kutsha rechu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushvechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor, V'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Bekonei HaKol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avod, U'Mevi Goel Ibnei Bneihem, Leman Shemo B'Yav, HaMelech Ozer, Ufoked Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ufoked Sarah, Ata Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayim Etim Ata Rav Le'Oshia, Morid Ata, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayim Etim Berachamim Rabim, Zomech Noflim, Berofech Olim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayim Emunato Lishenei Afar, Micha mocha bal gevurot, Umido melach, Melech limid, Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua v'neman atalech hayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh hametim. Noritzecha v'nagdishecha Yeza Rotziach Sarfei Kodesh O Amakdishim Shimcha Ba'Kodesh Gakatuv Al-Yan Nevi'echa Kadosh, 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 Adonai, Tzivah, Melech HaAretz, Kivodo, Kivodo, Malei Olam, Meshat Havsho Alim, Zelazeho, Megom Kivodo, Leumatam, Baruch Yomeru, Mimakamu yifim berachamim beyachanam yagarim shemo ervog b'chol yom tamid paman be'ava shema omerim Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Eloheinu Avinu Malkeinu Mosheinu Yashminu berachamim shnei le'kol chai le'alachem le'Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem v'beikotshecha katuv le'mor Yimloch Adonai le'lamalai Ksianu davador Hallelujah Hallelujah Adonai Nagin golach Chonet Netzachim kedushancha Nakish V'shivcha chalayim V'pinu l'shmei olam ba'ed Kel melech Adonai kadosh Ada baruch Ada Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh Tikadosh Ay, ay, Yikra bikra shmei rabba be'alma dibra kiru devin lech malchutei b'chaycham v'mechon v'chaydecho be'Yisrael b'galav zman karev v'imru amen yishmei rabba marach le'olam olam le'omayah yibarach v'shabach v'yipra v'tron v'naseh v'dada v'dalei v'dalach shmei d'kudsha b'recho Leila mi gober chada b'shira dadush b'chada b'nechamata d'amiram be'alma v'imru amen Yikabel sodon v'adon dechol Yisrael kamron Shmaya v'imru amen Yislam ron Shmaya v'chaim alen v'kol Yisrael v'imru amen Osei shalom v'imru avoya Osei shalom alen v'kol Yisrael v'imru amen Page 182 Ein Keloheinu Ein Kadonenu Ein Kemalkeinu Ein Kemoshienu Michel Eloheinu, Michadonenu, Michemalkeinu, Michemoshienu, no del Eloheinu, no del Adonenu, no del Malkeinu, no del Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shekiru, Avotenu lefanecha et ketoret hasamim. Aleinu leshabeach ladona kol atet gedula leotzer breshit shelo asanu kigoye arasot velo samanu kimishbechot adama shelo sam chelkenu kahem vegoralenu kechol hamonam vanachnu korim משתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שנשמעים ויוסד המושך ובראשם כי המלכות שלך יום תמלוך בכבוד, כך כתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. We'll continue with the psalm Echad. We will continue with the psalm for Elul on page 80. Le David Adonai Achad shalti mi Lulei emanti liro petuv Adonai beretz chayim kavei Adonai chazak vayemetz libeka vekavei el Adonai. This week we observe the Yartzeiten of Etta Schaefer, mother of Florence Grossman, Lottie Droller, mother of Michael Droller, Leo Herzog, grandfather of Jonathan Herzog, Helen Mayerson, mother of Howard Mayerson, Vivian Schwartz, mother of Matthew Schwartz, Irvin M. Fradkin, father of Lois Katz, Basil Tetzo, father of Liz Tetzo, Alice Glickman, mother of Emily Glickman, and also Clara Brandis, who is memorialized on our board, May all of their memories be blessings in this community now and always. Mourner's Kaddish is on page 82. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'gala u'v'izman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal shmei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. I'd like to extend a yasher koach to Jeremy for a beautiful shacharit, and to Joel for a beautiful Torah service, and of course to Rabbi Dina Shargel for laning, a challenging laning, beautifully and precisely as always. And I'd like to invite up David Heft.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. We today have a beautiful day, and I hope everyone enjoys their Shabbos. First off, I want to thank the Barback family for sponsoring today's Kiddush. I wish they were here with us. Ronnie and Spencer sponsored it. We have one already sponsored for next Shabbat. Hopefully the weather will be this nice and we can enjoy it outdoors. We still have a few high holiday events coming up. If you might notice, Sukkot is coming up very quickly. Monday night is Erev, Sukkot. And we have to put up our sukkah. It doesn't self-erect. So tomorrow at 10 a.m., if you are able-bodied, please come and we'll get it up quickly if we have enough people. Also, Rhonda is working with the rabbi on the Birkur Kolim group. She's worked on this a long time by herself, but looks like it's getting a new impetus. If you want to participate in visiting the sick and comforting them, please contact either Rhonda or the rabbi.
I'll just say a word about what that is in case people don't know. I mean, it's mainly just, we all find out in different ways when people are sick. It's mainly just a list of people that are on Rhonda's list or my list, so that if someone wants to visit or wants a call or needs a checkup on, we call you and say, hey, why don't you check up on this person? It's not a huge time commitment. God willing, we won't have hundreds of people sick, but it's a wonderful thing to do and a wonderful mitzvah.
And I did get some helpers.
Fantastic.
All right, Yashkar. That's wonderful to hear. Also, the CSA Soup Kitchen continues to feed people who are in need. That's under Jill Goldenberg's aegis, I think would be the right word for that. This week, on the 23rd of September, she asking for volunteers to provide a roast chicken or rotisserie chicken, which I had a brilliant brainstorm last night. You can buy at Fairway. Salad and brownies, that couldn't be easier. So I think I should follow my own advice and do that.
And then drop it at her house?
That I have to check with her. Anyone who wants to do that, please check with her. We have a lot of adult education offerings this year, thanks to the rabbi. And I think you have to go to the weekly announcements to see the list and the times and all that. So please take a look at that and contact Julia Koss at the office if you want to participate in any of those. And we have the PJC sponsors of the 2021-22 Scholar Stream program, which I am now going to let the rabbi speak about for a minute.
Oh, yes, it is. So JTS, last year we sponsored this as well. JTS starting the pandemic, offered some live streaming, sort of lecture series and classes with really, really world-renowned scholars. And as a member congregation, we support that to the tune of $450 a year, which is a wonderful way of us sort of supporting the seminary, and we should make use of it because we're supporting it. And you just click on a link and you can learn with really world-class scholars. It's a really worthwhile and low bar to entry thing. So click the link.
Is it an interactive experience?
I didn't do them. I didn't participate in them last year. I don't know how interactive they are. Did you participate in them last year? Are they interactive?
Yeah.
You can type in questions and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, and of course, because we've paid the fee, it's free of charge for us.
Yeah.
And the link is on our weekly announcements, I think. Okay, and also I want to mention that Todd Eckelman lost his mother this week. He's down in Tampa. He's had a bad year. He lost his brother. Not so long. I don't remember whether step or not. Stepfather too. Thank you. I think we still have his email.
Here's his number if you want. I spoke with him right before Yom Kippur, and he's doing okay, but it's obviously been a lot of loss for him. So I'm sure you would appreciate a call from me. So if you want his number, it's in the book, but you can also.
Okay. With that,
A question?
yes.
We're having the Kohen Sukkah as a congregation coming up.
Oh, thank you very much.
And can you say who we are as VP2? Because our son is coming.
All right. Well, thank you, Jacqueline. We're going to have a Friday night dinner in the sukkah, Shabbat dinner in the sukkah. It's going to be Indian food. There's a vegetarian kosher Indian restaurant in Hartsdale. Please look it up. I think the person to contact would be Andrea Rothberg, because she's really sort of led this, but I'm sure Julia Koss is also coordinating with her. So if you want to come, you want to bring people like us, please. And that's this coming Friday. You know, Maryut is everywhere.
No, it'll get that. I mean, it'll get that.
No, actually, Mario told me to contact Andrea.
Maryut is sort of like the ether. It's like it permeates the whole world. You turn around, and next thing you know is Maryut's on it. She knows about it. She'll tell you about it.
There are also, I noticed, loving networking in the kitchen.
Oh.
So if you're so inclined to pick yourself,
That's for people board.
for the people who order, correct?
Yes.
Blue loving are on the
Yeah.
table. The extra people there to have us.
Yeah, and don't take mine, okay?
In the fridge.
Okay, all right, well, anyway, I think, is there anything else I've missed? Because I've missed a lot today. Okay, well, anyway, Shabbat Shalom.
Adon Olam Asher Mala V'terem Kol Yisir Nivra Li'en Asa B'chetz Orot Azai Melech Shelo Nivra V'yacharei Kichlot HaKol Lebado Yimloch Nora Adonai li v'lo
song on